Greetings, Sentinels fans. It's time to talk about the Sentinels RPG. Today I'm going to talk about an introduction for players. I'm saving character creation for next week. We will just talk about how to play right now. So what do you need to bring to the table? Obviously, you need to have your filled-in character sheet and a pencil, but in order to play, you will need dice. Do you see this? If you play tabletop RPGs, then you're probably intimately familiar with this D20, as it is one of the most important dice in the game of D&D. You will not be needing this. You will need 2 or 3 copies of D4s, D6s, D8s, D10s, and D12s, depending on what you have for your character sheet. And you also need your method of communication, be it text, voice chat, or the air particles between you people. Otherwise known as talking, which I know is a bit of a foreign concept right now. When your characters are in the scene, when the bad guys surround you and you need to fight, you have a few basic actions to work with. You can attack an enemy, you can defend yourself or an ally, you can boost yourself or an ally, you can hinder an enemy, you can overcome an obstacle. Every time you perform one of these actions, you roll 3 dice. Why 3 dice? Well, you're more likely to have a good outcome, since you only really care about one of those numbers, be it the maximum or the middle one. To select your dice, we go to our character sheet. You select a die from your powers, a die from your qualities, and your status die. Think about the flavor of your action. If, for example, you were having Legacy fly in to slam a minion from above, you can take a die from your list of powers, in this case flight, so you can take a D10, another die from your qualities, in this case close combat, so take another D10, and one from your statuses. So if she is a bit hurt and in the yellow zone, she gets a D8. You roll these 3 dice together. Whichever die rolls the middle value is your action die, unless you're using an ability that uses the max die, the min die, or a combination of the 3. So if your middle value for this attack is 6, then you deal 6 damage and the minion has to roll to protect itself. If, instead, you're using her head-on collision ability, she can use her max die with her flight power instead, dealing 9 damage. And this system works with almost every action. Say you're playing Absolute Zero and you're trying to trap a bunch of mind-controlled people in a room without hurting them. You may use your intuition power, which is a D10, your creativity quality, a D8, and your green status die, a D8, to do an overcome. Roll a mid of 4 and you succeed, but with a minor twist. More on those later. Now specifics on the actions. Do note that both heroes and villains can perform any of these actions. Attacks are straightforward. Shoot that minion, punch that turret, perform sweet wrestling moves on that robot, the world's your oyster. Roll the damage dice. The mid decides how much damage you deal. If you're targeting a supervillain, that's how much health they lose. If you're hitting a minion or lieutenant, then they make a defense save. If minions succeed, they drop a die size, while lieutenants stay the same. If a lieutenant fails to save, they drop a die size, whereas minions are taken out altogether. And if you roll twice their current die size, they're done. There is no hit chance roll. All attack rolls hit. The dice just determine effectiveness. And of course, if you can attack, you can also defend. This is beforehand preparation for an attack, not a response to an enemy hitting you. You can target yourself or an ally. It rolls the same as an attack, but the mid die reduces the next damage dealt to your target by that value. And that is specifically the next hit only. The defense goes away after it activates, or if that target has their turn and the shield goes away. There are also ways of regaining health in the middle of a fight, but this isn't a common action and is not usually available to your heroes. Next, you can boost or hinder. These are 2 sides of the same coin. You roll your 3 dice to create a modifier. You can boost yourself or an ally to improve a future roll, or you can hinder an enemy to mess up their next roll. Hinders are usually used up by the character's next roll, but boosts can be stored up and used all at once if that is what you desire. Once used, modifiers go away unless they are persistent. The ability that you used, or the GM, will tell you if it's persistent. So you roll. Your dice give you a number. That number corresponds with this list. If you boosted and rolled a 5, for example, you got a +2 on a future roll. If you hinder and roll a 9, you give a bad guy a -3 on their next roll. But now we have the particularly interesting action, the overcome. A lot of time, this is where you create the interesting stories. Overcomes are what you perform to deal with an obstacle or complication that doesn't always involve punching the problem. That doesn't mean that you can't punch for your overcome. It just means that it's designed for non-combat specific things. Hacking the keypad, intercepting that rocket, or even convince a detective to help you. Overcomes occupy that large scale of actions not covered by other basic actions. You roll your dice, and they determine if your effort succeeds and how well. At 0 or less, you fail quite epically, possibly making the entire situation worse. Do note that since there are no zeros on these dice, it's impossible for this to happen unless you have a hinder on you. 1 through 3, your action either fails or it succeeds with a major twist. Player's choice. 4 through 7, fails or succeeds with a minor twist. Player's choice. 8 through 11, success with no repercussions. and 12 and above is such amazing success that you gain unexpected benefits. Heroes can only perform one action in a turn, but many abilities allow them to do multiple things at once. For example, Legacy's Evasive Assault can attack and defend in the same action, or actions can do one thing really well, like Bunker's Decoupled Barrage, which attacks up to 3 targets at the same time. However, some abilities don't require actions. Once per round, a hero can use a reaction. If the condition stated by the ability is met, then that hero can do the thing that reaction allows. Tachyon's Nimble Strike can smack an enemy when they first show up, for example, possibly taking them out before they get to her. Heroes only get one reaction a round though. Once they use theirs, they need to wait until their next turn to replenish it. Other abilities are innate, and thus are always active, provided the hero is in the proper zone. Absolute Zero has an innate where, whenever he would be hit by cold damage, he would heal that much instead. As long as he is at least in the yellow zone, this is always true. But earlier I mentioned twists. What are twists? This is a way for either the GM to bring in story hooks, or to complicate the fight. This can involve summoning minions, putting civilians in danger, hurting or hindering heroes, and sometimes even help heroes if the GM is feeling charitable. Minor twists are usually along the line of minor nuisances. A couple points of damage, a temporary hinder, a minor decrease of a power die, that kind of thing. They are not designed to be that bad, and if the GM decides to use twists to bring in story elements from a character's principles or another reason, then usually the twist doesn't have particularly long-lasting consequences. Major twists are more dramatic. They can drop extra challenges, more dangerous hinders, or damaging events, and any story hooks the GM brings in will matter a fair amount more. One of your powers stop working, you set off a hidden trap, your failure to save a civilian earns you an enemy, your injuries make it really hard to keep your identity a secret the next day. Whatever really brings up the dramatic tension. And GMs, if your players are being really cagey with their overcomes, or they are just being very successful at them, you can activate twists during the environment phase. I mentioned earlier the green and yellow zones. Here I'm referring to the gyro system. Green, yellow, red, out. This is an indication of the intensity of things on a personal level and in the scene as a whole. It's an escalation mechanic, where things get more insane as the situation goes on. The scarier the zone, the more abilities your heroes get access to, and the more dangerous twists the GM gets. Green zone is when everything is in control, red zone is when everything is falling apart. When a hero loses all their health, they are out. This doesn't necessarily mean they are dead, unless the player wants them dead, of course. It just means they are incapacitated, in much the same way that incapacitation worked in the card game. You get one ability you can use to help out your teammates on your turn, but you are otherwise out of the fight, and once the scene is over, you are back in action. And if the GM lets you, you can also heal in between fights. The scene itself gets in on the gyro system too. You get a scene tracker that looks similar to this. Every time the environment gets a turn, it checks off a mark on the scene tracker. When it runs out of green marks, the scene is now in the yellow, and all elements of the scene treat it as if they are in the yellow, including hero status dice, regardless if they have more health than that. Same deal with red and with out. When the scene goes out, the heroes lose. This doesn't necessarily end the game, but it does mean something really bad happened. That bomb you were trying to defuse went off and destroyed the monument. The villain gets away scot-free with the tech that they stole. That informant you were protecting died before giving you the information. Lots of things that can complicate your hero plans. And if you want this to be your last game with this hero group, then you can even kill those heroes. And if you kill those heroes but still want them back, remember, this is comic books. Death is not an insurmountable obstacle. Also, turn order is a bit different from how other RPGs operate. Instead of rolling initiative, the players or GM indicates who goes first, and whoever's turn it is can select who goes next, including the villains and environment. This allows players freedom to choose the order of their actions and set up cool synergies. One hero can boost another hero's attack or overcome, or a hero can set themselves in front of the bad guys while another hero defends them before letting the villains go, or other tactics your players might pursue. A word of warning though. The GM gets multiple turns. The minions get a turn, lieutenants get a turn, supervillains get a turn, and the environment gets a turn. These bad guys can pass off turns to each other at the GM's discretion, for the same tactical benefits that the heroes get from choosing turn order. And if you leave them as the final actor in the round, well, you give them the option to have all the bad guys go at once in the beginning of the next round before you get the chance to prepare for them. This turn system adds an extra layer of strategy for both the GM and the players, and it feels so much more dynamic than a set turn order. You will, however, probably need to come up with a system among you and your players as to how to keep track of turns during a round, since you need to keep track of who's gone and who hasn't. Me and my players use a Mancala board for this purpose. At the end of the game, the players count up hero points that they gain from using their special overcomes, or otherwise impressing the GM. so they can use those points as boosts in the next session. If this was the final issue of that story arc, usually every 6 games, then the heroes may create a trait collection that they may use for benefits once a session in future games. And I think I will stop there. Do note, for the sake of time, that I glossed over a lot of details. This video is meant to be an introduction, not a replacement for the rules. You'll have to still go through those rules at on your own time. The Sentinels RPG is available on the Greater Than Games site, DriveThru RPGs, and your local game store. And I hope to see you next week, where I talk about character creation. Take care, friends. The ability that... This is a way for either the G... Okay. These bad guys can pass... long sentences. Yikes. Someone's using the bathroom. Someone's using the bathroom. Someone's using the bathroom and my leg's falling asleep. Ugh.